Good evening and welcome to Season 4, Episode 15 of Axiom Flux. And today's date is 18th of February 2018. We're going to be talking about the Magna Carta, 1215, 1297, whichever version you want. But we're gonna stick with the original 1215 Magna Carta. And the question, if it is all a question, is, was it an English charter or was it a Norman charter? Does it matter? Is there a difference? I tend to think there is. We live in a day and age where in all countries around the world, especially the Western countries, where we feel that, there's some type of world dictatorship wanting to take over, New World Order, whatever you want to call it, and liberties and freedoms are being stripped away, and a lot of people feel that, they want to get back to their grassroots and their customs of their particular country in the founding days, whether it be America, England, Canada, Australia, etc., etc. Mostly Commonwealth type countries, but it's happening all the way across Europe and the continent. So the reason why it's about Magna Carta is a lot of people tend to use the ancient rights and liberties that they feel was contained within the Magna Carta and given to all people in England at that time. So there's a lot to cover, but I'm going to say good evening to guests because I've got a few on here tonight who's going to pose a few questions and maybe have their own answers or whatever. But anyway, we've got Predator Geoff, we've got Lopi all the way from the USSA, and we've also got Bok in Canada, and PJ in England, and me in England, as well as Predator Geoff. So I'm going to say good evening to Geoff first. Evening, Geoff. Are you all right?
Good evening, Stav. All right, mate. How's it going?
Yeah, not too bad. We're doing okay. So that's the main thing. And Lopi, are you, Lopi, you there?
I'm here. Hello, my darling.
Hello, Lopi. How are you today? All right?
I'm fair to middling, darling. Fair to middling.
That's good enough for me. That's good enough. And we've also got Bok from Canada. You there, Bok? Are you on mute, Bok?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, got you, Bok. Good evening. How are you?
Doing well, thanks.
Good to hear you, my old friend. Very good to hear you. We've got PJ as well, rumbling around in the engineering department. All right, PJ.
Evening, people. All right, stuff.
Yeah, not too bad. That's good. Now, I think I think we'll start this off. I think it's with the let's start off with saying I think you've got a cartoon type thing which would be quite good to show first, which is along the lines of how Magna Carta is portrayed in this modern day and age. Is it, Lopi? Is it something like that?
Yes. It basically explains how it came to be.
Okay,
And,
that's fine.
It's only a short, and it's not in depth. It just gives you the basic of what it is.
It's the mainstream perception of Magna Carta, yeah, today, sort of like, yeah, okay. Well, if you want to pop that on, let's kick it off with that, and if you want to.
It's the second link in the chat.
Sorry?
It's the second link in the chat.
Okay, I don't know. Do you want to take that, Geoff, for us? Click on the second link in the chat.
Yeah, sure.
It's Magna Carta.
You want me to screen share as well, yeah?
Yes, please, if you wouldn't mind.
Okie dokie. Hang on. Second link.
That's the wrong chat. You didn't have the right chat. Right one.
I haven't got that one. I can only see one link there.
Because, hang on, let me get it. I'll put it in. I didn't know you didn't have it up there. There you go.
All right, I'll get that up now. Right, I'll screen share again. And okay, do you want me to play that video? Do you?
Yes, please.
Okay, narrated by Monty Python's Terry Jones. The animation takes you back in time to medieval England in 1215 under the reign of bad King John. Why was the charter originally created, and what does it actually say? There we go.
This may look like a plain, unassuming piece of parchment, but it's actually one of the most famous documents in the world. Magna Carta, meaning the Great Charter, has inspired people across the centuries, from Thomas Jefferson to Mahatma Gandhi. But why was the Charter originally created, and what does it actually say? Let us take you back to medieval England. It's the year 1215, and the ruler is King John. Many people believe that King John was one of the worst kings in history. He imprisoned his former wife, he starved his opponents to death, he allegedly murdered his own nephew, and pulled the beards of the Irish chiefs. King John had imposed heavy taxes on his barons in order to pay for his expensive foreign wars. If they refused to pay, he punished them severely or seized their property. The barons demanded that King John obey the law. When he refused, they captured London, and John was forced to negotiate. The two sides met at Runnymede in June 1215. The result of the negotiations was written down by the king's clerks into the document we know as Magna Carta. Although most of the Charter's clauses dealt with medieval rights and customs, Magna Carta has become a powerful symbol of liberty around the world. The most famous clause, which is still part of the law today, for the first time gave all free men the right to justice and a fair trial. No man shall be arrested or imprisoned except by the judgment of their equals and by the law of the land. To no one will we sell. However, this clause was not as liberal as it sounds. The Charter only applied to free men. The vast majority of people in 1215 were unfreed peasants who were ruled over by their landowners. And although Magna Carta was intended to create peace between King John and his rebellious barons, England was plunged into civil war after the Pope declared the Charter invalid. When King John died of dysentery in 1216, 9-year-old Henry III took to the throne. To keep the peace, Magna Carta was reissued several times during the 13th century, until it was finally made part of English law. Magna Carta has lived on for 800 years and is echoed in the United States Declaration of Independence and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Perhaps Magna Carta's most important legacy is that everyone, including our leaders, must obey the law. What started out as a document of specific complaints from a group of barons has turned into an international symbol of liberty, without which we might not have the rights we value so much today.
Okay, there you go, folks.
Right, that's it.
That is a bit of an oxymoron, isn't it? It's basically telling you. It's basically telling you what you want to hear. It's a hook and bait sort of thing. Almost like propaganda is teaching you what I call modern eyes are looking, and they're not. When you look at ancient parchments and stuff like that, you have to look at it with the eyes of that time, not with today's eyes, because that is what that video is depicting, is what today's eyes were is seeing, not necessarily the eyes of the time.
Yeah, okay. That's exactly what it is. I thought it was quite good for what it was, a little cartoon. And, you know, people think, well, that's what Magna Carta is. Whichever one you decide to, but everybody goes to the original 1215 Magna Carta. And my interest has always been, I was taught all about that when I was very young. And because of my age group and everything, we know that, you know, a lot of it is as it should be. But we've got to decide, I think, you know, the 1215 Charter, why was the 1215 Charter really put together? And as that cartoon said, there was a rebellion or you know, a revolt by the barons against the king because, you know, he was charging taxes that they couldn't pay, and if they didn't pay him, he'd get foreign mercenaries to come and seize their property. So the barons were very much up on arms against the king, whichever way you want to look at it. So they rebelled under this clause 61, and they got him to put his seal on the Runnymede Magna, you know, Charter in 1215. So that's all very fine and everything. Which in that charter you have all those clauses, including the important one, which is clause 61, the right to rebel, as people say today, distress and disdain.
Stav, we've got another guest with us, Norman.
All right, okay. Well, welcome aboard, Norman. We'll get to you in a minute. How are you? All right? Well, it's yeah. Nice to meet you, Norman. It's just something I think we need to really talk about.
Yeah, I think so. I think the communication is the key, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Everybody seems to have. Well, no, there's a mainstream opinion or assumption on or what they think Magna Carta is and what it should be. And then there's people that are informed who don't look for themselves and read the whole Magna Carta and read the clauses.
That's right.
Although when it was put together, it was just one big document and one load of words. It wasn't put into clauses much later. But anyway,
I think it's quite appropriate and a bit coincidental that we got somebody called Norman with us. Considering the topic of conversation, which is about whether it's a Norman charter or an English charter. So
absolutely. It's very
well. I'm actually a proud Scotsman.
That's good.
You're not Frankish then.
Pardon?
Yeah,
you're not Frankish then.
Well, I think I've got a bit of Viking and a bit of Scotsman in me. Strangely enough.
I think Stav will tell us a bit later about the link between the Vikings and the French. Hopefully, and expand on that for us.
Well, I want to try and stick to the subject of the Magna Carta and not deviate too much. But anyway, my interest was in this was I knew it for what it was, and the mainstream was very much like that cartoon basically, and that was that. And that's all we needed in those days, and it's gone on from there. And it's only just recently that I really bothered to study and read the whole of the Magna Carta 1215 and all the articles, and actually, you know, try and not read between the lines, read the words for what they mean, what it meant at that time in 1215. Well, one thing that kind of I didn't know about until recently, there was something quite important that happened in the 100 years before that with the conquest in 1066 of William the Conqueror, and 20 years later where he put this the first ever massive census for England. That's right, the Doomsday Record,
wasn't it? We never got to know about
that's right.
school.
Absolutely.
We the history we were taught was basically from William the Conqueror onwards.
That's right. Well, the Doomsday Record is where I thought let's have a look here, and I didn't realise, but there was two places in the Doomsday Record that was not put in or not omitted, just was not put in, and they happened to be two quite important places. And I just thought, now I wonder why William the Conqueror left them out. One was the English capital, which was Winchester at that time, and the other was the City of London. Those two are not in the Domesday records. A lot of people don't know that. But why would they be left out? So that's when I thought, well, we'll have to look a little bit more deeper into this. So one thing led to another, and basically I thought, let me look at the connection between the City of London and the Magna Carta, and it's a very important connection between the City of London and Magna Carta. Winchester was only there because it was at the time the capital of England and Wessex by the Godwins, and it was put in place as a capital from Alfred the Great. But very shortly afterwards, after William the Conqueror died and his son William Rufus, they moved the last of anything of the capital of England from Winchester to London with the treasury, and that's what he done. And then Winchester just disappears into wherever, and London becomes what it is today. So I thought, well, let's just see. I'm wondering what the Magna Carta really is about. And it wasn't until I started looking at different articles, and not the main ones like Article 39, which the right to a free trial, and Article 61, the right to rebel, as put into short words. Let's have a look at somewhere else. And one of the most interesting articles I found in the Magna Carta, I don't know if I can screen share this, PJ. Let's have a look. Let me screen share this. I've got a fair bit to sort of say, so I want to get it out and done out of the way and give the floor to everybody else, and then everybody else can give their thoughts on it. So let me just screen share this. Right. Okay. We got here. Okay. Hopefully that's come up.
Yeah.
And we got the Magna Carta project. This is clause 13, and clause 13 says, "And the City of London is to have all its ancient liberties and free customs, right, both on land and water. Moreover, we wish and grant that all other cities, boroughs, towns, ports are to have all their liberties and free customs." And I thought, well, if you read that as what we, normally you say, yeah, that's fair enough, I get that. But there's an important difference here. There's one word here that makes all the difference, and it's this, right? That's word there called ancient. Now, in the City of London, it quite clearly states the City of London is to have all its ancient liberties and free customs. When it comes to all the other cities outside of London, we only have this, liberties and free customs. So I thought, well, what's so important about that? Well, the ancient liberties and free customs, when they say ancient, what the Norman king, let's be honest, of that time, King John, who's the great grandson of William the Conqueror, the Normans only actually refer to ancient liberties and free customs to the City of London. That means that any laws they had before they were conquered, that's way back, including common law and Alfred the Great's common law, right? They are to retain those and retain those ancient laws and customs. Anywhere else is a no-go. It's liberties and free customs of what the Normans give you. So the difference is, as far as I was concerned, I looked into it here and there and everywhere, ancient liberties and free customs were only for people in the City of London and nowhere else. And that is true to today, because ancient liberties is the old alderman liberties, ancient liberties, and aldermen are Anglo-Saxons, and that meant Anglo-Saxon law, which is common law. Anywhere outside that, you don't have those ancient liberties. So that's what I came to a conclusion. I don't want to put up a lot of other research to confirm that. It's just to get the gist of the idea. So sort of moving on from there. So I thought, well, what can we glean from this? Well, who's granting these customs? Well, as far as I'm concerned, the people who went to the original 1215 Runnymede Magna Carta, of which King John put his seal to. Now, here's a list of all the people that attended it. There's a quorum of 25 barons that attended it. And every one of these barons, of the 25, apart from one, is a Norman. None of them are Anglo-Saxon. None of them are Anglo-Saxon, okay? Apart from one. And this is the guy here. His name's William Hardell. William Hardell is an Anglo-Saxon, all right? And the significance of that is that William Hardell is none other than, if it loads up, none other than the Lord Mayor of London. Now, isn't that a coincidence? The only English,
Up a bit,
the only Englishman there, or Anglo-Saxon. Pardon?
Your audio is breaking up a bit. Well, to me it is. I don't know if anybody else is getting the same.
It should be all right now. It's because that page loading up. It's just one member.
Right.
Right. So it just says it confirms.
Do you want to repeat
Is that okay?
what you just said there, Stav, for our viewers?
Well, every one of those barons that attended the signing of the Magna Carta, right,
Yeah.
were Norman, apart from one, and which is this William Hardell, which I've brought up here now. And it's just, and it clearly states here, just one member of the 25 was represented in the list as an official capacity, and that was the Mayor of London, William Hardell. Now,
Right.
that says to me that, you know, here we have an Anglo-Saxon, the only one who has his ancients, liberties and customs, right? And he happens to be the Lord Mayor of London. That's because they were granted that right to do that within this charter, and he was there to see the seal applied to it by the king. But anyway, I mean, you can read all these. I'll give you all the links, and no need to go on any more than that. Really, I just wanted to make a point of that particular thing. Right. So here we are. We have the signing of the Magna Carta. Well, the signing, the king puts his seal to the Magna Carta. 1215 with a quorum of 25 barons, of which 24 are Normans, and only one is an Anglo-Saxon earl, if you like, and he happens to be the London. They called him in them days the Mayor of London. Today they're called Lord. And ever since then, ever since that date, every Lord Mayor of London, not Mayor of London, every Lord Mayor of London has to be an alderman, an Anglo-Saxon, even to this day, right? Alderman. Alderman means Anglo-Saxon rights, right? Which is ancient rights. Only the City of London can have those. Nobody outside of the City of London can have those ancient rights. So basically, you know, alderman doesn't mean to say nowadays that you have to be of Anglo-Saxon heritage, blood, whatever. It means English common law. In other words, it means the ancient rights of the Anglo-Saxons and their law. Right? So they get obviously certain privileges and their old customs and liberties of pre-conquest days. That's how London, the City of London, has managed to be able to be a separate part of England ever since, and they have special privileges. There is a clause in the Magna Carta, and I think it's clause 11. I could be wrong, but I think it's clause 11, where the City of London, if it's here, clause 11. No, that's the Jewish one. But was it clause 9, clause 10? I'll find it in a minute when we'll come back to it. But it says there that the City of London, right, doesn't have to be charged scutage. Well, scutage in those days was tax. We'll refer to tax today. But they can give aid. In other words, they can offer money to the king, whatever, but they're not duty bound to be charged tax. But anybody else outside the Normans charge land tax, whatever, whichever. But it's only in the city. So basically, we have there a difference in the way the City of London is completely different from England even today. So London plays a very significant part in the Charter. But
Staff,
getting back to the
does that only apply to the barons? Because
Well,
when you say the City of London is not obliged to pay taxes or anything, they can give monies, but they're not obliged to. Now,
basically they're not enforced to. Okay, they can give aid, and in today's modern aid, I'd say that's professional lobbying from corporations.
What I'm asking is that only the barons, the elite. Now, we're not talking about their servants, the people that are the serfs. You know,
no, it only applies. It only applies to barons and free men and women. Right? I come to free.
So the serfs living in the City of London
there is
still have to pay.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You've got to remember that in those days, the City of London was quite larger than what it is today. But if you was a serf working for a livery company, because that's what you had there were liveries, they were early corporations, what you call today, wool merchants, metal merchants, gold merchants. They were pretty much like banks today. You might have somebody that comes in and cleans a bank as a serf today. But in those days, they didn't necessarily have the liberties of their masters. But what I'm saying is that the free men and women and barons, call them what you like, as well as free men and women, the livery people that set up businesses in the City of London, right? They weren't obliged to pay tax, but they could give aid. If you gave aid today, what would you be doing? You want something changed in some legislation to suit your big corporation. It's called lobbying, I would say today. But we're getting a little bit off the track of what the question of whether it's a Norman and English charter. So we'll try and pull it back in. Yeah.
Before we carry on, could you explain to our viewers the distinction between City of London and London City and the difference?
Well, we're referring to 1215 London. The City of London today is the Mile, where all the banks and all the big corporations are, right? Where all the lobbying is, where all basically they run Parliament because, well, they haven't run it, but they've got their own man in Parliament called a remembrancer, and he sits alongside the Speaker. You have two mayors of London. One's the Lord Mayor of London, which is the City of London Corporation, or the City of London. They have their own police force. They have their own Lord Mayor, which gets elected once every year, and he has to be an alderman. Yeah. The other London Mayor, the Greater London Mayor, which is Sadiq Khan, is nothing to do with this now. Right, but you got to bear in mind, in 1215, City of London was, London meant London in those days, it was a place where tradesmen traded, early merchants, early corporations, what you call today, and that's what those privileges and ancient liberties and customs, they were for them people. Okay, so let's not get So we got to keep it in 1215. So there was a reason for all of this, and why they chose only the City of London to keep their Anglo-Saxon customs and ancient liberties. And, so basically, and that's, if you like, the only part what's left of Anglo-Saxon England, but it's not as smooth as that. There's a lot of corruption, backstabbing going on, and I have many more theories about all the way back to the Battle of Hastings, which we won't get into tonight. But anyway, let's just sort of leave it like that, I guess, for the moment. But here we have, anyway, right, here we have the City of London that gets left out of the Doomsday Records, okay? And later on, 100 years later or so, there's this chart. By the way, before the Lord Mayors were brought in, all the sheriffs were Anglo-Saxon before that in the 12th century too. So it's always been part of that. So we move fast forward to 1215, and let's not forget, all the barons that were there, including the king, apart from this William Hardell, were Normans, right? The Norman barons were there for them themselves and only for themselves, because they were the ones who were losing their land. It wasn't there for the serf, right? It wasn't there for the conquered English people that got stuffed in the feudal system and became serfs. Let's be honest, apart from one or two privileged people who were put there in line for this city of London and the merchants in London. And that's the only free people after the conquest, for many, many reasons, which other people can come up with their own theories to even to this day. So, you know, with that as we got it, who's granting the charter? Who's putting the seal to the charter? Who's put the charter to the king? That you can't deny that it's a Norman. You know, the idea is Norman. It's made legal by a Norman, a king. The barons are Normans, and let's face it. You know, let's face it. 130 odd years after the conquest, we're a conquered nation. England, Anglo-Saxons. That's where English comes from. England, right? Sassenachs, I think, as Scottish call us. I think Norman agree with that, or along those lines. You know, there's plenty of evidence to say, well, if I had to take a stab, it's a Norman charter. Okay, so that's what I feel. I mean, I can't prove it, and some people disagree with that, and that's fair enough. I'm always willing to not be proved wrong, but you know, to go back on what I say, because you know they've got factual evidence that actually says otherwise, and I'd say, yeah, sure, fine, absolutely, I agree with you, and I'll change my mind about it. The other thing I will just very quickly cover is that if it's a Norman charter, right, all of those clauses will be for the Normans' benefit and the barons' benefit. And I'm not talking about later charters like the last one in 1297 by Edward I, okay, where they say the right to a free trial is extended to every man in England. I'm talking about the 1215 that everybody seems to refer to as the Magna Carta. So what really was the clause 39 of right to a free trial, which is I'm going to quickly basically cover here, and I'll also finish off with a little bit of a recording done by a Queen's Counsellor, High Court judge, and whatever we think it means, the thing is the buck stops with them on what they think, because they're the high going to have it any other way. Anyway, clause 39 says, no free man is to be arrested or imprisoned or deceased or outlawed or exiled or in any other way ruined, nor will we go against him or send against him except by the lawful judgment of his peers or by the law of the land. Right, we have here, what a lot of people grab hold of is this here, free man. Now, what did a free man mean in 1215? What is a free man in 1215? I've already pointed towards, you know, it's these guys in the city of London. And here we go. If we go to a piece here, which is the City of London website, which clearly states here. Now, it doesn't give an exact period, but it believed freedom of the city. You know, there's a clue. One of the oldest surviving traditional ceremonies still in existence today is believed to have been first presented in 1237. Believed to have been first presented in 1230. History and origins. The medieval term freeman meant someone who was not the property of a feudal lord, but enjoyed privileges such as the right to earn money and own land. Town dwellers who were protected by their charter of their town or city were often free, hence the term freedom of the city. From the Middle Ages and Victorian era, the freedom was the right to trade, enable members of the guild or the livery to carry out their trade or craft in the square mile, etc., etc., etc. Right, so that what they're saying is here, you know, this tradition of ceremonies which started in 1237, believed to have started in 1237. That's a ceremony which they decided, but the existence of free men was long before that. So you could say 1215 quite easily, quite reasonably, that they existed there. Now, freemen, I feel, well, no, I don't feel. I just think that these freemen, they must have their ancient customs and liberties. According to Clause 13, the only people who could have the ancient customs and liberties were the people of the City of London, or which becomes the livery people, as I've just clearly put what freeman or freedom of the city means. But anybody outside of London, therefore, cannot be a freeman, cannot have these ancient, these ancient customs and liberties. That's how I've looked into it, and I've been over more papers and bits and pieces, which I won't bore you with. It's just a basic grasp of what I think. The misconception, the perception of the free man today, before it was extended to all men in 1297, which is only has 3 clauses of the 1215 Magna Carta left in it. That's the 1297. I'm not going to debate the 1297, but most people point to the 1215 because it was pre-Parliament. It's a charter, and you can't be part of it if you didn't sign it. Blah blah blah. The Parliament wasn't party to it, so we stick with 1215. And so we have a question about what a free man is. Well, according to Clause 13, it's only a chap could have his ancient rights within London. So there we are. That's as far as I really want to take Clause 39. So again, this is the Normans led in some of the Saxons. Only a few, perhaps in the City of London, have their ancient laws, customs, liberties and customs and liberties. So does it mean that, have I got it? Am I along the right lines of what Magna Carta 1215 was all about? Recorded. I don't know if you want to play it, Geoff. Let me go back to Google a minute, because I'm pretty much done with this for the moment. Stop sharing. That's stop sharing. That's it. Okay. Right. Now Geoff's got a little 30-40 seconds a lecture, question and answers from the audience from Gresham College in London. And this chap in a minute when Geoff plays it is a Queen's Counsellor, and he is Queen's Bench, Queen's Counsellor, High Court, whatever. And it is what Clause 39 really means. So do you want
Stav?
Yep.
Okay, do you want me to play it now? Yeah.
Can I just
Yes,
quickly interject? Stav, your screen sharing still, and it's affecting your audio. Go on, Geoff.
All right, mate.
An injustice of a right to reciprocal right.
I just like to make one point on this before I deal with that. One of the things about the Charter is that it doesn't create rights that apply to everybody. It actually gives privileges. So, for instance, the protection of Clause 39 only applied to free men and women. And as you go through, and trial by peers is really the peers seeking a privilege only to be tried by other barons. The other point you're making is a jurisprudential point that I think is too wide an extent to takes us right back to our undergraduate days, which are a long time ago. So,
okay, is that enough first off?
That's enough. Yeah, that's all. Now, it doesn't matter what I'm saying it does matter what we think, and it does matter what we say. right? And it doesn't matter how people interpret things, but there's a Queen's Counsellor saying what Magna Carta 1215 means to the right to a free trial, whatever you want to call it. It means that you can only be judged by your peers if you're a peer yourself or a free man or woman. So in actual fact, to be judged by your peers, what he's saying from what I've just, hopefully you guys have sort of kept up with me and understood what I've been trying to say. If not, I'll try and clear it up. That, you know, unless you're a baron or a peer, you can't be judged by a peer, right? Or if you're a free man or woman. Now, a free man or woman can only exist at that time in the City of London, as far as I'm concerned, because of Article 13. Now, a lot of people say that's very, you know, you're just hanging on one word, ancient there. Yes, I may be, but this, remember, it's not, it's something that, you know, you can, it's not easy to prove yes, it's not easy to prove no, because it's ancient is the very important word in that. So, I mean, to wrap it up, I can, you know, give you some more information that may confirm, but it seems to me like, you know, if you conquer a nation, right, and you take it over and you enforce your feudal system, your rules from your country onto the conquered nation, which is what every nation does when it conquers another one. And the conquered is the only way to lose their sovereignty, right? There's no way in this world, I don't think it's logical, that that person is going to say, well, don't worry, because in 100 years' time, we're going to give it all back and we're just going to walk away and let you be Anglo-Saxons again. I just can't see that mentality, but there we are. So there we are. That's my big waffle. I'm sorry it's taken so long, PJ, but there we are. So I'm open. Of course you can, Lopi. Go ahead.
I'd like to remind any of our listeners that what you're saying in the Magna Carta was with the old views, not modern. Okay, when I say modern, I'm saying today with our understanding of the language. The old days, you have to remember, why would the barons want to write a writ that only applies to them, so that they can only be judged by their peers, or free men, not free women, free men, because women did not have any power, but free men. Why? Well, put it in perspective. A baron generally has buddies. They're not going to want to be judged by somebody who they have control over, because if your serf, your little slave person, is upset with you, you're going to get hung. So it's smarter for a baron to only have another baron who has the same mentality of being on the higher upper echelon of society, looking down at somebody else, instead of, you know, they're not going to judge somebody as their equal. That's their equal. Not, it's easier for them to judge somebody below them. So
no, absolutely, that's a good point to make, and I think to a lot of people it would seem obvious to them. That's right. We're talking about what the charter was for those people in 1215, and who it was for, and who was in charge, and also why people use 1215 today. The most famous one they tried to use to kick against the system, which they use, and that's fine, is Article 61, the right to rebel. Well, that will only apply to the barons again. You can only, if you're going to use 1215 to rebel, then you better make sure that you're a Norman and you're a baron, because it refers to that day in history, that time, that period. And so those rights, even if they applied today, Okay, 61. Are you a baron or your peer? Are you a Norman? I don't know. You see, I'll leave that open to people, which is the question: is it a Norman charter or is it an English charter? Well, to me, it's quite clear. It's a Norman charter for the Norman barons to be able to keep the grip, even of their own king, who is Norman, in case he gets other ideas, like perhaps he did do, and that's why it was produced. But those rights within the 1215 Magna Carta are for the elite, for the barons, and the free men and women, if they existed. Like you say, in those days, women didn't have any rights, but there we are. But only the free men existed in the City of London, nowhere else. So,
and we have to remember, they're not giving rights to us. We're getting liberties, and liberties are far from rights. The liberties are a handout. Here's a grain of rice. That's a liberty. Right. You may say that we have a right to a pound of rice, but we don't have that as per the Magna Carta. We are not given that humanitarian right to have a pound of rice. We're giving the liberty to have a grain of rice. Liberties and rights are so far different. And
that's right. Well, that's absolutely a good point to make, because privileges, you know.
I perceive it slightly different. I perceive it that a liberty is a government granted right, whereas a freedom is something different, an indefeasible and fundamental right is something different, but which is a freedom. But what we've got here is a government granted liberty, which is a sort of government right, a right granted.
Well, the barons are the government. You forget. Those are the ones that were making the rules and the laws. They're the ones who made the Magna Carta to basically make a constitutional monarch, because it basically tells the king what he can and can't do.
Oh yeah, it's definitely.
So, I mean, the barons were the government.
I would suspect that it's definitely a two-tier system based on serfs on the one hand, people that live in the City of London on the other hand, and then of course you've got the barons, which had special privileges to be judged by other barons, and free men of the City of London, not free men on the land, which is I think something entirely different. But it would definitely seem to me that, like Stav rightly said about the ancient right, whereas they had the ancient rights, our rights in the other boroughs throughout the country were very limited by the sounds of it. That's what seems to be the case. Anyway, I don't know whether that's right or not, or whether I've got that right or wrong.
No, you're right in the respect that ancient customs and liberties, or liberties and customs, right? That ancient means whatever was there before. Okay, that in my book that means, you know, the people of the free men, if you like, of the City of London could use their ancient liberties and customs and liberties, which is pre-conquest, in my book. That's how I look at that, because it's ancient, So but that's the only place. That's the only place. Yeah. But any cities outside that, customs and liberties. Well, customs and liberties, like Lopi's, you know, you can have customs. We can have a game of darts. That's a custom. But you know, your liberties are kind of like privileges, what they decide to give to you, which was the Norman barons and the Norman king of that time. No ancient at all outside. So There we are. So any more questions?
Serfs had the modern type rules and liberties, and the peers, City of London, freemen of the City of the London and the barons would have a much better quality of justice by the sounds of it.
Yes.
I don't know.
Well, that's right.
Because
that's
they
it.
to be judged by a jury of their peers and things like that by the sounds of it, and we wouldn't.
Well, to be honest, I mean, a lot of these guys say, well, there's a reason why it wasn't mentioned in the Doomsday Records, London, is because the Normans weren't interested in trade and companies and that sort of thing. They just wanted to rule over the land and tax the land. And, you know, the City of London wasn't worth it because they were all tradesmen or early merchants, merchants, and, you know, they weren't interested in that. They wanted to rule the land and tax the people on the land. Yeah,
I've had a thought about that stuff. So basically, the Doomsday Book was a census, wasn't it? Yeah. So if they did a census of everywhere but the City of London, then it could be basically an inventory of slaves or serfs, if you like. Maybe just an idea. I don't know. I might have that wrong.
Well, you were. Anybody outside of London who don't have their ancient customs and liberties were, you know, you were put into, you know, being a serf. It's a feudal system by the Normans. They conquered us after all, you know, whichever way they done it, but they done it, and put down quite a few rebellions after 1066. There's 20 years of rebellions, and there needs to be a lot to perhaps talk about that, but. At the end of the day, I just feel that if people are going to use 1215 Magna Carta, by using Magna Carta 1250, right, all you're doing is enforcing the rights of the City of London. And most of these people that want to, you know, use the 1215 Magna Carta, from what I can tell, maybe I'm wrong, are dead against the corporate banks and the corruption which in London. So it's self-defeating using Magna Carta to say we got our liberties, we were granted them in the Magna Carta. What, you mean the enemy that conquered you gave you privileges so that you could take your country back whenever you like? I mean, that would be like Rome conquering the world as they knew it then, and then writing a charter saying you can have it all back anytime you like. I just think it's rather an absurd thing to think, but maybe it's only what I found. It was until recently that, you know, it was quite disturbing to find out what I found, and now I think about it now because I didn't really thought, no, that's not right, because I was like everybody else. And I wish I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. Hopefully somebody out can say, look, mate, you ain't got a clue what's going on. You forgot to mention this. You forgot to mention that. And here's some factual evidence to prove that you're wrong. And I go, yeah, great. That's fine. But that's how I've looked at it. And I think if you're going to try and do things, then maybe a bit later on and stick to English Bill of Rights. Declaration of Rights, actually, I think is more important than the Bill of Rights, which is a statute. But that's another story.
Put things in perspective, the barons obviously has their own interest. We, as the serfs, because we're all paupers, I don't know any one of us with a title, so we're the serfs. We're the people that we're owned by the barons, yeah. the landlords, and we are collateral. We absolutely mean nothing. We are a means of getting something done. We are the ones who are putting food on their tables. They're not putting food on ours, and we are the ones who are dying in battle for their wars and their fights. They're not going into battle. They're telling us to go. So yeah. It puts it into that's a bit of perspective as to the people who wrote the Magna Carta. They don't care about the masses. They don't care about the people they control. They care about themselves. So the Magna Carta was written for themselves, to protect them. Yeah. Because they held the king up at knife point, forced him to sign a paper. Now, if the king did not do that and he had a stronger army, what would happen to the barons? They'd be in the tower, wouldn't they? They'd be hanging. You know, they had to protect themselves. And the best way to protect themselves was to enforce the Magna Carta with ancient liberties.
Yeah, the reason why I say the ancient liberties is more to do with the City of London and why people don't understand what the City of London is and why it's remained the City of London even today, although it shrunk because, you know, it wasn't as big as what London is today. But why has it managed to keep its Anglo-Saxon liberties and customs where we lost ours 1,000 years ago?
Yeah, it's important to distinguish the fact that in the City of London, it's not the same as the rest of England because they've got their own flag, they've got their own system of law, which is completely different from the rest of the realm. So that would stand to reason. It would seem to join the dots together to me very nicely. What you've you know, sort of.
I'm not great at putting things over, and I could put it over a lot better. Somebody else could, but you know, I mean, where do I stand with the Wessex flag? Well, when people say, "Are you English?" I say yes. And what does that mean? That means Anglo-Saxon. It doesn't mean medieval. It doesn't mean Tudor. It doesn't mean all the rest that came after it. At the end of the day, you know, I'm a golden rule man. I do unto others. I believe in common law. I think it's a good law. At the end of the day, it's a decent way to run some type of society. And that's as far, I mean, England, as far as I'm concerned, died in 1066. And that was it. That was the end of it. There was no more England after that. English, now that's a different thing. It's a bit like, I don't know whether William Wallace stole it. You know, you may take our land, but you'll never take our freedom. Well, I think it kind of applies in England too at that time. So
I've got some external kind of factors here, Andy. I wonder if they apply here. Like the population around then was between 10,000 and 12,000 people. And by 1300, it grew to like 80,000 people. Like, I mean, what caused such a surge there? I've got a few other things, but I'll leave that one right there for now.
Well, that's another good point.
There was a surge was the protein, the food. They started planting more and eating better. We also have to remember, originally there was a lot of death. I mean, what was it? 1215. The bubonic plague had not long ago been going on, or was that after? I can't remember when the plague hit.
Well, yeah, a lot of that, Lopi, would have been trade because at that time the Normans controlled quite a lot of France too, and the later on kings of the Plantagenets, like Henry II, who married Eleanor of Aquitaine. All of a sudden, we you know, England and France had a lot of land they shared together. So all of a sudden, trade coming through and to and fro, and a kind of immigration. People started to move more between France and some other areas, principalities in Italy too. Where, you know, this trade started to expand because all of a sudden, you know, the Normans took over and the Plantagenets later on married into royalty in other areas of the continent. So all of a sudden, England's joined to the continent, and large areas of France is now under the English king. The Norman king. The Norman king.
Also a transition period, like it was the end of the sword age, and the age of the gun was coming in.
Oh, it's a bit later on. You're talking Cromwellian days and Charles I onwards and that sort of era.
Yeah.
But this is during the Plantagenet, which was like Henry II. John, who signed the Magna Carta, his father, Henry II, married Eleanor of Aquitaine of France, which now all of a sudden we've got all this land and that on the continent joined to the to the British English, sorry, the Norman monarchy. Let's get it right.
Yeah.
It's so bloody confusing after time. You get tongue-tied, but there's an expansion of trade and people moving to and fro from these merchants were starting to, starting to trade, and the city of London, was merchants early on. The livery companies, there were merchants, and this is how populations expand and trade expands because of joining up
Infrastructure.
areas on the continent to England under the realm of the king of what people call England, but in them times the Angevins and the Normans. So I think that's got a lot to do with the population explosion. If there was, like you say, Bob, but that's my 2 pence. I just want to see if I can bring PJ. PJ, you've got something to say about words and stuff, haven't you?
I have, but I'll leave that to a bit later on. I'll let Norman have a chat. He may have something to say first.
Yes, Norman. Yeah. Are you there? Your microphone's open.
He's probably not got anything to say, unless he's away for a minute. He may pop in. I'm going to just touch on quickly while I've got Mark open. When you were talking about, using 1215 Magna Carta, Article 61, unless you're a baron, it's not really good to be using such things, is it? You can pledge your allegiance to them, I suppose, but just bear in mind who these people are. Especially if you're an Anglo-Saxon, you really do need to consider that, I think. But each to their own. It's just my opinion. And I think when we're talking about free men and free men out land and all that, just bear in mind that if you're going to go and try and take your country back, they might consider you a terrorist organisation, probably because they think you're going to conquer them. So just bear that in mind.
Well, yes, of course. Today it's a little bit different to those days, but I just feel that there was far better things. I mean, if somebody said to me, "Well, do you want to take back England?" You'd have to take it back, and for a start, London. I wouldn't have a parliament in London very well. Would I have a parliament at all? I don't know, but it would be outside of London, because it would mean going back to the way we were. If you're going to use old customs, if you're going to use old charters about the people when they were alive then at that time, and you want things to go back to that, then you've got to go back 100 years before that, because England died 100 years before that. If you think you're English, people have lost the concept of what English means. They don't understand what I don't think they understand what it means. We are a conquered nation, and that was 1066, and that happened, whichever way we look at it. So England stopped being England. It became part of the Norman dynasty and the Angevin kings and the rest of them, and the Plantagenets, and on and on and on. So that is why you got the story of Robin Hood and all these so-called legends, and the taxman fighting the sheriff of Nottingham, and he was a Norman. Robin Longstride in the film with Russell Crowe, all that business. Oh, that sounds like an English man, an Anglo-Saxon name, Longstride. Yes, that's all good, right? But if you want to, golden rule, common law, do unto others, no harm, loss, damage, and use that. And if you're going to have a civil type law, contract law, go about your way in a non-fraudulent way, that's great. That's how I was brought up. You've got thousands and thousands and thousands of statutes, which the Normans really began. So if you're going to say that those statutes are more important than perhaps Alfred the Great statutes, if you want to look at it like that, then I don't think you can say, I'm an Anglo-Saxon, I'm English, and I want it to go back to how it was. So and I don't think you can ever go back to it anyway, because it was a long time ago. But there we are. Now, Norman, are you there? Well, if you're speaking, Norman, we're having problems with you.
Stav, I was just thinking maybe the only way we'll ever be able to restore our ancient rights under what was Alfred the Great, you know, common law and all that, to, via a reconquista, what you were talking about the other day. So,
yeah. Don't get me wrong, guys. I mean, I used to be all for lawful rebellion because I got to a point where I thought, well, this is the only thing left. So it must be, you know, until obviously more recent findings have come to light, where honestly I couldn't tell people and advise people to do Article 61 because in myself, I'm leaning with Stav on the fact that it's not for us, but doesn't mean to say it's not for you. Anything you put together, if there's enough people doing it, anything can work. So I'm not telling people don't use it, and I'm not telling people to use it, if that makes any sense.
Another thing that strikes me as a bit of a what's the word? A bit of a quandary is the thing about King John when he was forced into signing this thing. Would that be classed because he was forced with a knife at his throat or something, wasn't he? And wouldn't that be under duress? So it wouldn't be a lawful document, maybe. I don't know.
And well, that was put later on, and King John, after a few months, went back on all of the Magna Carta, and
right.
There we are. And excommunications came, and all the rest of it, and it gets an all bit, you know, all a little bit legal in my book. But no, I just feel that it's not an Anglo-Saxon charter. So why, if you feel that you're an Anglo-Saxon, an Englishman, let's not forget where English comes from. And
well,
if
it was down to me, Stav, I'd get rid of all the legislation, go back to simple, basic common law.
Absolutely, I agree.
It's common law, but that's me personally, because I think all law, in my opinion, should be based on morals and ethics rather than preventive, which is the legislative type. With the legislation and the statutes, it's all about preventive, which then can be, abused and used to just levy lots of unfair fines and forfeitures and stuff. In my opinion, that's what I would like to see, is to go back to basic common law, basic common sense. And
well, to be honest, if you went into a courtroom, you'd have a better chance of a skeleton argument with the legal system. Although I wouldn't do it myself, but I mean, if you're forced with forfeitures and fines in the Declaration of Rights and the English Bill of Rights, they're void without conviction. So you'd have a better chance of using that part of the Constitution than any of the Magna Carta 1215, because it's in spirit it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's not, but to me it really wasn't written for the people. It wasn't written for the Anglo-Saxon people who got conquered 100 years before. It was for the barons and the freemen of the city of London. That's so as far as it goes.
Let's assume that what you've said is actually correct. Then in that case, what we need to then do, I would say, is to establish clearly and concisely which rules are the modern rules that the serfs were given, and which and what our remedies in law are, and what the difference is between that and the ancient laws, to know exactly what extra sort of liberties they had to what we had, and sort out where our remedies are, if indeed we have any remedies in law, or whether we have access to proper justice.
Well, do a conquered and enslaved people have any Any? Do they have any rules apart from what they are, a conquered and enslaved people? Do they have any right?
You've got one. To do as you're told.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think that's right. I think we probably did have certain rights.
No, as a feudal serf, your right is to do as you're told.
Yeah,
otherwise, you will be killed or beaten.
If you look at what Stav said earlier about the difference between the City of London, they had the ancient rights and customs, whereas the other boroughs had what was probably...
But that only applies to the baron. You're not a baron. I'm not a baron. Baroness.
Lopi, I just said the rest of the boroughs throughout the realm had the obviously the modern version of the rights and customs rather than the ancient rights and customs. So we still had some rights and customs.
No, there's no rights. It's liberties and privileges.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
No, there's no such thing as putting rights in mixing it up. What
the government granted right.
One at a time, guys, because but nobody can hear both of you if you talk over each other.
What I'm talking about is a liberty as in a government granted right rather than an indefeasible and fundamental right. That's the difference I'm trying to say. I mean, we all know what we'd like to be our rights, which is our indefeasible fundamental rights. But what I'm talking about is that according to what Stav read out earlier, is that we had ancient rights. The barons had that, and the freemen of the City of London had the ancient rights and customs. We had the modern version of the rights and customs. So obviously we had some rights and customs, whatever that was, however minimal compared to the City of London people. So that's just my thought. I don't know, but what we should be doing is establishing the difference and what is what, exactly what rights we have got, and if there's any remedy in law that we can use.
But you're using. Here's the problem. You're doing exactly what a lot of these people in today's mind that is using the Magna Carta in reference to what was the term that PJ used, like the freemen on the land, the common purpose, whatever you call it. They're using it in the wrong context. You're using the word right in the same form as a liberty in using that as today's modern terminology. You can't do that because, one, it was written in 1215. There was no rights. Rights are totally different than liberties and privileges, liberties and customs. Right. They are not interchangeable.
Well, it depends how you interpret it. Like,
no, that's the problem. You're using modern terminology and eyes. You cannot do that with something that old because it is plain and simple. Liberties and customs, not rights. Otherwise, it would say rights. It would not say liberties.
I think, Lopi, to be fair, Geoff brings up a good point. You had a right, even the serf, right, to follow his religion, which was predominantly Christianity in England in those days. So if you was a slave, a serf, right, you had the right to follow your religion, which was Christianity. But apart from that, that was included into the customs, I think, part. But apart from
you don't have
any
that much of a right to have your own, to go into Christianity.
That's about,
it's not much of a right or option when you're being forced to go into Christianity. When you otherwise
that's another
be ostracized and sent off the land. Take the pagans. The pagans.
Well, the simple question is: Do serfs have any customs and liberties, let alone anything else. But if you're a slave, you're a slave, aren't you?
Serfs have them customs. Yeah, of course. Everybody has some sort of custom. But as far as being able to uphold and to demonstrate those customs, they did not have that right.
No,
It was
no,
they were allowed by their baron, their landlord. If the landlord or the baron decided, no, I don't want you to put up a burning man during the harvest to celebrate
When
the
when was common law created?
By Alfred the Great.
Sorry, Andy?
By Alfred the Great, 9th century Anglo-Saxon king.
Common law. So that was probably the first time where common men had a set of laws.
Well, it was common law was Alfred the Great had a kind of parliament, but they were eldermen, and earl, E-L-R, means like from elf or wisdom, right? Which was kind of a meeting of these guys. And what happened was the warring between the Vikings, the Anglo-Saxons, and the different tribes of Anglo-Saxons were all warring until along came this King Alfred of Wessex, okay, who eventually defeated the warring Vikings at that time, Guthrum, right? And he got them he actually got them to take Christianity as his religion, by the way. But they came to an agreement that, you know, in the northeast of England, which was mostly Danish Vikings, or Vikings, Norwegian, Danish, anyway, Vikings, to have their own Dane law, but under the whole realm was run by Alfred the Great, and he had a dome or dome book, and the dome book had he put together Germanic, Viking or Scandinavian, Danish, whatever, and also Celtic laws, and combined them all together, okay, and then enshrined them within the 10 Commandments of Christianity, okay, within the spirit of Christianity, and that's what we know as our common law. There, and that's how it was. It's cause no loss, damage, harm, etc. There was duties that every Anglo-Saxon got one hide of land. You were entitled to one hide of land, which is equivalent today of 20 acres today. Right? You had a right to that land. Wow. As an Anglo-Saxon free man. They actually used the word even then. An Anglo-Saxon free man had a right to 20 acres of land as you would see it today, right? That was your born right to have, of which you raised your family, you gave food to, and you provided some food to
they did the same here in the settlement of the early West, Andy. They did the same here. Land was practically for free. Because you had such a low population and such a large amount of fertile land. It was like, go for it.
Absolutely. And the only other thing that you had to, your duty was that they had these burhs, castle burhs, that are separated by 40 miles, all connecting across the whole land. And you had to be ready, standing ready at different times to be there for invaders from Vikings or whatever. So he had a structural command, if you like, across the kingdom from these burh castles, right? But which you had to give time to, and I think they got some type of road system going, Alfred the Great did. So you had to do your duty to be there to fight off the foreign invaders when needed, and it was kind of like an army or whatever you wanted to call it at that time. But apart from that, all you had to do was to work your acre of land, bring your family up, you had to pay a certain amount to the king of the products of your land, but it wasn't 10% or 20% to the Catholic Church, blah blah blah. After the Normans came in, etc., etc., etc. But you never had no right to any land. The land all then was taken by the barons, and you were a serf in a feudal system.
Yeah.
And you had to work the land to eat, basically. Otherwise, you died. That was the difference. So, and
Well, I tell you what, if you gave people the option here in Canada right now, saying you can go live for free if you want to, we'll give you this land that's devoted to a free lifestyle in northern Canada, I bet you 90% of the people wouldn't do it. It's just a very harsh environment. I mean,
well, that's right. That's right. Absolutely. But I mean, there's a lot of people now that would say, well, look, give me 20 acres and all I've got to do is show up now and then and say, I'm here ready for action in case we get a foreigner come, and I'll fight the battle against them. Well, you've got to defend your own land anyway.
It's a bigger responsibility than people think. I mean, just to look after 1 acre is a lot of work. Like 20 acres, nature will take over.
Well, yes, but then it was a land of plenty in those days. I mean, the population ain't nothing like it today. But it wasn't an easy life, but it was a freedom. It's what would
open
and it was decency and morals as far as we could see. Was there fighting and murders? Yes, of course there was, and people broke out, disputes, whatever, and then it all started to break down with more new raids from Norwegian Vikings, and all the rest started to come along. And if you watch the Viking series, I think Geoff's a big fan of it. I've watched a couple of episodes. You start to see what goes on.
I don't mean to change subject or anything, but I'd like to mention that if anybody is interested in seeing the original copy of the Magna Carta, I believe it's still at Salisbury Cathedral. So it's a good day out and to go and see a bit of history if they're interested.
Yeah, I think there's 3 original copies still in existence, but I think I don't know if they're on, you may have a copy of it on display. I don't think they're the originals, because they'll be very old and they're very looked after and they have to be in a special place.
Well, I put a link in the chat. They say it's an original copy of the Magna Carta. That's Salisbury's claim to fame, and whether it be or not, I don't know. But there it is.
Yeah, that's good. Excellent. Thanks. Well, leave it, and we'll leave all the links for PJ and whatever. I'm just so I mean, what do you think, guys and girls, after what I've sort of I've put forward? The question is it an English charter or is it a Norman charter? What do you think?
I would say from what we've sussed out, as well as the word Magna Carta and what it means, I would say it's almost definitely a Norman charter, quite frankly. Well, if we've got none of these rights, or if we've got no remedy in law, then it should just be a case of us saying, well, to hell with their system. We'll just claim our undefeasible and fundamental rights, which everybody, a right is anything that's not a wrong, as far as I'm concerned. So, as long as you're not doing anybody a wrong, you've got the right to do whatever the hell you like. That's what I would say. Because my rights stop where your rights start. That's the way I look at it. I don't. My attitude is, if you can't find remedy within the system, then you've got to become your own system, and just live according to your morals and your ethics. That's what I would say, Stav, personally. And to hell with the system. It's been designed against.
Absolutely. I think if you wanna use the Magna Carta for the right to a free trial and to be tried by your peers, then I would say you've got to go with the 1297 version, right? Where they say that was extended to all men. Okay. But you then, if you're going to use 1297, this is what I say to these groups. I'm sure they've thought it out, whatever. I don't know. Then, if you use 1297 as the statute, because that's when it became statute, right? Put into English law in a statute, you can't use Article 61 from 1215.
Right.
See what I'm saying?
Well,
You can. No, I'll just interject there because you can use it. And if there's enough of you, you'll probably get somewhere with it. But all you're doing is you're just conquering the city of corruption. And if you can achieve that, then it's yours.
I mean, I guess
Well, yeah, you can.
the real question is does it serve you better? Like she was saying earlier, like if you choose to use an older version, does it serve you better versus using a newer constitution? I would think that's crazy. I mean, obviously the newer constitution has more rights, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I would say. This is where the confusion. You can use whatever you like. Nobody can stop you. Of course, you can ask what you like. Anybody can ask anybody for absolutely anything. There's no law against asking or using. But to use it to fight the legal system and to use 1215, Article 61, all you're doing is enforcing the rights within the customs of liberties. If you're not a baron or a freeman in the city of London, all you're doing is reaffirming the rights that the customs and liberties has as a slave.
Yeah.
And I think that's defeated.
Doesn't it make a new look on police by consent?
Well, this is why I said I think we should just throw their entire system in the bin, because by using their system, you're saying openly, I am a serf, I accept my place, and I'm doing as I'm told, based on what rights you've granted me. Well, who grants people rights? Do the government or the powers that be at the time, do they have the right to tell us how we live our lives and all the rest of it? I don't agree with that. I think it's just a case of establishing your own standards. And in my case, as far as I'm concerned, a right is anything that's not a wrong. So, as long as you're not doing wrong by anybody else, you have the right to do whatever the hell.
No, that's right. I agree.
Does anybody else see the irony here of, how England and France, they don't really get on? It's always been a bit of a joke, oh, the froggies are at it again or whatever. That they're the ones who wrote the Magna Carta that are controlling us. No, I'm not laughing. Yeah. Okay, I am laughing, but it's in that a bit ironic that that we are upholding a French paper.
Maybe that's why there's always been that sort of dislike between the English or the Anglo-Saxons, as you might call them, and the Frankish or French Normans or whatever. Maybe this is the whole reason. Maybe it goes all the way back to 1066 when we were conquered at the Battle of Hastings.
Yeah, well, it does. But the thing is, what Lopi's saying is the French. Now, Normans were not French. Let's remember this. Normans were ancestors of King Rollo, which are Vikings.
Right.
The ancestors, I think great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather of William the Conqueror was King Rollo, the Viking. They took the northern part of France, and they actually made a deal with the King of France in those days. And he said, well, you can have the northern part as long as you can keep away the Anglo-Saxons and the other Vikings and all the rest, and you can have that land. He made a deal. So the Normans did marry into French people, right? But a lot of their DNA is directly from the Vikings themselves. Is the irony, and also Edward the Confessor's side of things. We have King Canute and Arthur Canute, who were Danish Vikings who ruled for a short period. There's a lot of mixing going on at that time. But the thing is, actually, this is something I found out. It's probably a coincidence, right? That the actual chapel that William the Conqueror got married in France is called EU. Right? It's called EU. You can look on it. It's in Normandy. It's not far from just up the coast and in a bit from Dieppe and that way. If you look there, you'll find it. Now this EU was founded by a Norman who was more Viking DNA, and this, I can't remember his name now, but anyway, I'll find it out and leave a link. This is the guy who actually founded the town of EU in Normandy, is the guy who actually put together the feudal system. Isn't that incredible? It may be a coincidence, but isn't it? There's an EU long before an EU in Brussels, and it's in Normandy. And William the Conqueror got married in that chapel. I just find that fascinating.
I find that amazing. How you managed to find that, Stav, I don't know, but that's a useful little nugget, isn't it?
I'm putting in a we'll share it. The last link I just put in shows exactly where EU is. If you'll share that.
Yeah, I'll share that for you, Lopi.
It will show you exactly where it's at, and in location to the right, within the Normandy region.
Is that the last link in the chat box? Is it?
Yes.
Salisbury?
Yes. EU is not far from Calais.
There you go. I shall read this out. EU Seine Maritime. EU is a commune in the Seine Maritime Department in the Normandy region in northern France. The EU is located near the coast in the eastern part of the department near the border with Picardy. Its inhabitants are known as French in the Udois. And it goes on about the geography.
Well, it's the county of the EU was created in 996 by Duke Richard I of Normandy for his illegitimate son Geoffrey, Count of Brionne. It was
Richard, actually, no, but you found him. Richard I was also known as Richard the Fearless, and Richard the Fearless gets given the rightful he is the guy anyway. I wouldn't know the word. He is the guy, they say in history, who put together the feudal system.
And it also says in 1050, William, Duke of Normandy, the future William the Conqueror and King of England, married Matilda, the daughter of the Count of Flanders, at the chapel of the castle in EU. The chapel is the only part of the castle which is still standing today.
This may be all a coincidence, of course, and we've got off the Magna Carta, but they're interesting coincidences. There's a village not far from me, and it's called Who.
It might have got off topic. It might have got off topic, Stav, but we've only gone from Magna Carta to EU. When, if you want to, I know EU's not the same as the European Convention in human rights, but where did that come from? As we know, the Magna Carta.
Yeah.
Is there a place called EEC? I wonder. Because, of course, before the European Union, known as the European Economic Community. Of course, the difference is, of course, the EU, as in the European Union, is an acronym, whereas EU is spelt with a capital E and a lowercase u. But there does seem a very odd coincidence there, doesn't it?
And another thing, Stav, is it gives a new look on what Winston Churchill said. Even more than previously.
Well, there's an interesting thing as well that connects with. Well, that's maybe not so. The Count of Eu, who came across at that time, one of the counts, he was a Count of Eu who came across with William the Conqueror and helped him win at the Battle of Hastings, was given the whole area of Hastings, and he also had the first chapel there. The first chapel was there, and that was the Count of View's chapel. And also all around it, there's a village not far from me, because I'm not too far from the Battle of Hastings site and whatever. But there's a village up the road called Who, right? And when you break it all down, they messed around. It changes over the years, but actually, it's a twin, really, of this Who in Normandy. And I just find it so coincidental with what's turned out now, 1,000 years later, that we're going to be reconquered by the EU again. Isn't that ironic?
It is. Do you know what I really don't like about the word Europe? It sounds like somebody projectile vomiting. Europe!
Oh, they're going to try and conquer us again. Perhaps it's a reconquista of them on us again.
I keep it simple. I put a little dialect on it, and I don't call it Europe. I call it Europe. Now, you can hang yourself with it if you want.
Oh, yeah, Europe. Yeah, a nice one, Pete.
I think there's a lot. I mean, sometime perhaps if whatever I get some more information, I've got to do a lot more research. Why? Because I like doing it. Am I right? I don't know. Am I wrong? I don't know. Nobody knows. I wasn't there 1,000 years ago. We can all have our assumptions on what the Magna Carta was, how it came about, the deception and all the backstabbing and all what was going on at the time. Maybe there was no Battle of Hastings as such. Maybe it was a small skirmish. Maybe they murdered Harold Godwinson. Maybe he didn't even get to the battle. There's lots of things after the event, immediately afterwards, that points to, hang on a minute, there was meant to be 10,000 people killed, 10,000, Anglo-Saxons and Norman cavalry killed at this place in battle in the southeast of England, called where the Battle of Hastings took place. They've never found a crumb there, not a crumb of evidence of this battle site, anything. So it stands, there's a lot of assumptions. People have got different ideas about what actually took place and when it took place. But I think the City of London is connected really at the heart of all of this, and maybe even connected to the Battle of Hastings and why William the Conqueror actually did become the conqueror of England. Maybe there's more to it. Maybe there was a lot of traitorism, treachery going on. Maybe there was a
few more trips on your spaceship, Andy, and you'll dig up a few more.
I'm gonna need more than that, Buck. But a lot of people will say you're completely out of the bloody. You're off the planet, Stav, because I think you're just trying to make things fit. But I don't know. What do you guys think? At the end of the day, it's worth talking about. But I just feel that the answer for the Englishman, the Anglo-Saxon, is elsewhere than relying on the Magna Carta 1215 for freedom.
It's in common law. It's not in the Magna Carta. It's in your common law. You don't need a book to keep your morals and ethics with you. You either choose to keep them or you let them go. You don't need any book. But it's definitely common law. I'd rather put trust in Alfred than anybody else. And you never even touched on Vortigern either, did you?
Oh, well, that's going back a bit further. About the, how the Anglo-Saxons came to be. But maybe we can touch on that another time, rather than being conquered by the Anglo-Saxons after the fall of the Roman Empire, when everybody can do a little bit of research and realise that they were mercenaries that came across. But first, and then there we are. We can talk about that another time if you like, PJ. Another version, and I'm sure we may be able to grab a few people that can come on and bring their version of it and join in the conversation, because that's what it's all about, conversation. Am I right? Am I wrong? I don't give. Well, I do give, but it's just research and what I found, and it'd be interesting to see if anybody else has researched for themselves rather than relying on hearsay from somebody else. well, you know, it does count because mate down the road in the pub told me. Well, okay, fine, but did you follow it up yourself? No, no need to. I trust him. Okay, fine. Okay. But there we are. There we are. I don't know if I've got much more to say on it. Have you got anything left to say on it, guys, girls?
I got something. As I just found this. It's on Wiki, and it's a little excerpt here. Celebration of the 800th anniversary of the original charter that occurred on June 15th, 2015. That's the 800th anniversary of the 1215 manuscript of the Magna Carta.
Yeah, Lopi, we did a talk when, you know, it was the 800th anniversary, and for those that are listening today, go back and listen to his other talks, because we weren't talking any of this on his previous ones, so you'll be able to see how far we've come from his original way of thinking, and I think that's the key. You can't get stuck on one track. You've got to be open-minded. You've got to be willing to at least look.
Yeah, what I was going to say is there's actually 4 copies still in existence of the original, 4 surviving original copies. I only thought there was 1 original copy left. But they're at the Lincoln Cathedral. The one is in the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. One's in the British Library, obviously, and Salisbury. So, you know, there you go. That's interesting.
Yes, that's right. I don't know.
The one that in the Library of Congress was on loan from the Lincoln Cathedral. Sorry.
Yeah, but there's more than one Magna Carta. There's 3/4 Magna Cartas.
Well, this one was from the original. From what I'm reading, it's from the 1215, because it was rewritten so many times during that time.
Yeah. So, but there we are. I personally feel that you know, I'm with John Harris, the guy who done many videos and speaks on all of this and how to exposing the corporate UK PLC for what it was, Freeman on the Land, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if he ever called himself Freeman on the Land. I'm not sure.
He said he never has. He goes, other people have referred to him as a free man, but he has never said it himself.
Yeah, and he said at the end, before whatever happened to him, that you can't use Magna Carta, guys. We can't use it. Because he obviously realised, maybe did he come to the same conclusion I did? I don't know. Was it a different conclusion why he said you can't use it, or it would be very wise to use it? But I know one thing: you have a Queen's Counsellor there at Gresham College, which is a lecture college, as far as I know. I don't know from what I've read on its site. That lectures in law and that sort of thing. The lawmakers, they say it's not for you, and that's something you've got to go up against. In their head, they're going to sit on that bench, and you're going to come up against them, and they're going to say, it's all irrelevant. It's not for you. Why are you claiming something that is not for you? There's no privileges there for you. You have no right to claim them privileges. So that's what you're up against.
It does beg the question, Stav. It does beg the question, do we have equality before the law? Because in a way, we don't. If there's a two-tier or two-class system, to me, it's quite depressing, the thought of it.
That's what they're terrified of. They're terrified of ideologies because they know that they can come back and get them in force. So the only way to get around that is to play these ideologies against one another.
Indeed.
They want you to think you have. they want you to think that the Magna Carta 1297, which gets rid of all of the clauses and only leaves 3 in, just happens to leave clause 13 in, by the way. Only 3. I think 1 is the right for the church, to go about their ways with their, to devout, whatever it is, their choice of their religion or something like that. The other one's clause 13 in the City of London, and the other one is clause 39, which is the right to be, the right to a free trial, basically. If that's what people would, or be judged by your peers, right? That's it. That's all that's left in statute today on .gov. You can go and look for it, and it's the 1297 one, which Edward the Longshanter first written into the law. So that's the only Magna Carta that you could actually use in some type of skeleton argument or defence if you need it. But obviously the other 2 clauses won't have nothing to do with you if you're just a normal geezer and you're not trading in London, or you haven't got a registered corporation in London. You could use that quite well, and actually do very well from it for that clause 13. But you can't use.
And I think that the freeman term needs to be defined a little more. It's, to me, what does it mean to me? A freeman means like you're just going primitive. You're living off the land. But if you need, if you need access to roads, materials, tools, and food and water and all, well, then all of a sudden you're not living free.
No, the freeman term originally was Saxon freemen before Magna Carta, before the conquest in 1066 by the Normans, and you were provided you had the right to claim your hide of land. Every man had his right to claim his hide of land. That was his born privilege in England. So you was a free man, but you had a couple of obligations. As long as you obeyed the law of the land, the rule of law they call today, basically. Funny, isn't it? But there we are. The underpinning of law by common law. They say, well, statutes. If it doesn't stack up to common law, you have to throw the statute out. But I don't. That's just. I think that's just twisted legalese, basically. But that's where the free man came from. But once the difference between an Anglo-Saxon free man and a Norman free man was chalk and cheese, as we can see. It's
what the word freedom actually means. Is it free from dominion by others?
Freedom of the city. The city is a free man in Norman law. That's what it means, as far as I can tell from what I found out. And
what I can see is the City of London scrapped completely, as in just becoming a part of London City rather than the City of London, and a new capital in Winchester, new capital of England, and a common charter for the common man, which is basically total freedom from any form of dominion whatsoever. That's what I would like to see.
All right, guys. I think that's it then. If we've all wrapped up, any more thoughts?
No, I'm pretty much done, PJ. I'm sorry it's been the Stav show tonight, but...
Well, I will add, if you look up the Hardell family name, it's a popular name for farmers and labourers, stuff like that.
And he chose merchants and to become a merchant in the end of the City of London, didn't he? So there we are. But yeah, okay, I'm all done. All finished up, and maybe we'll be having a conversation much more about this, if you like. But we can do other stuff beforehand or after, and we can look into that. But I think we've put a fair argument. I think we've put a fair
open discussion.
Yes,
I think you're a very good. Yeah. I think you're a very good historical revisionist, Stav. And who knows, in years to come, we might have to reevaluate and come back to the drawing board with new information on it. At some point.
Yep.
Always possible.
I just want to check, see if Norman's there, whether he wanted to say anything. Norman?
No, not really, but it's been very interesting.
Hopefully I didn't lose you. I kind of lose myself half the time. I'm not top class for presenting things and putting things down in the correct order, but yeah, you can see where I'm sort of coming from. Hopefully, Norman. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a great thing that we have things like this to communicate with.
Oh yeah. Can I just very quickly? Can I just ask you something as a Scotsman? What's your knowledge of the Declaration of Arbroath?
Very little, in fact, nil.
Well, you've obviously heard of Robert Bruce, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, you know he freed you, Scotsman, and you're still free, and all you need is 100 sovereigns to stand up.
Is that right?
Yes.
I know Scotsmen are smart, but that sounds a smart move, doesn't it?
Well, there was a few years ago a Scottish sovereigns movement, but they got a lot of harassment from the police. But if you go and check, if you're obviously you're into history, check out the Declaration of Arbroath, and and acquaint yourself with Robert Bruce.
About now, because it's like really we're talking really just about different cultures, aren't we? Here where I'm at, actually, Penrith in Cumbria.
Oh right.
We have a Viking history, a Scots history, and an Anglo-Saxon. It's like we've had all the cultures here for some strange reason. They made it. Most of this land up here was common land, and it was divided into like crofts, and they used to give people what they call crofts.
Yeah, crofters' cottages. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think they had to pay rent on them. I don't know how much there were, but I mean we're talking about where land was abundant. It was abundant.
Mm.
There was.
Well, it's written there for the Scots. And I have a Scottish brother-in-law, and he's middle 60s, late 60s, and it wasn't until recently that he didn't know as a Scotsman.
My family used to own all the land from Glasgow, or look after it. That's what we say. We look after it. We don't own it. We look after it. We used to own all the land from Glasgow down to Carlisle.
Ah, right.
Yes, and oh man, it's like well,
that's a bit of land.
It's only a Scotsman that feels it.
Scottish lowlands, yeah.
I suppose go back to what Stav was saying earlier about everybody having 20 acres of land, I suppose, because the population was so small then, you could probably quite easily do that, and I've still have plenty of land to spare. But
Geoff, today in England, but today you're not born with the right to claim 1 inch of land.
Yes.
No, we remember, Stav, when we actually tried to calculate how much space an individual would end up with. Because they kept putting out like, there's no room and everything's got to be cramped and things. So anyway, we did a bit of basic research, did a few sums, and we came to the conclusion that one person would have quite a lot of land, even still today.
Probably be only about half an acre a person, wouldn't it, or something like that? It'd be a lot less than what it was.
Oh, it were a lot less than 20 acres or whatever it were. Yeah.
I think it worked out about half an acre, which is quite a bit of land. Because what I said to PJ when I first thought of this, I said, get on Google Earth and get right where you are in your city, and now zoom out. And I said, you tell me how far you get before everything turns green.
Yeah.
It wasn't that far, was it, PJ?
Nope. And the start of the topic was discussion on allotments and what somebody could do for themselves. And
That's
it reached to us looking on Google Earth.
There's enough for everybody to have a little small holding and be able to support yourself. But of course, we were a conquered nation. The barons came in, and they decided that you're not to have a centimetre. You've got no right to a centimetre. And that has ruled us ever since. No matter what you want to say about English constitutions, parliaments, all the rest of it. It's the same with the Scottish people, like I said to Norman. The Scottish people, the Scottish people are free. Robert the Bruce freed them. They freed them, and go and check the Declaration of Arbroath. And as long as there's 100 Scottish sovereigns standing up, which a sovereign is just every single Scotsman. Any normal Scotsman is a sovereign, because it's the people that are sovereign, same as here. If you only need 100 to stand up.
It goes down, Scotland used to go down farther than Manchester, south of Manchester.
Yes.
So,
well, like Alexander, King Alexander, I think it was in the 12th century, it was the 13th century, he could have taken England. He come all the way down to the south here. All the way down.
But
he didn't.
It's a fascinating story, isn't it?
If buts and maybes. And when William Wallace could have, at that time, why he didn't carry on it for Scotland, he could have done. He could have done, but there we are. It's all history, isn't it? It's all interesting.
Of mine.
Sorry?
He's a relation direct. I'm a direct descendant from the family.
Well, there you are. Well, go and check out the.
Scotland was all clans and families. You see.
That's right.
And when your family is the strong thing, isn't it? We used to look on having big families. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, Norman, that most Scotsmen will remember Bannockburn and Robert Bruce. Most Scotsmen will always remember that.
Well,
but they don't realise the significance of it and what it achieved.
Yeah, true. But do you not think we've all been under like a spell?
Must be.
We've been in a trance. It seems like time stood still. It's like crazy.
Yes.
But
so I had to tell my brother-in-law at 67 years of age, as a Scotsman, comes from Glasgow, comes from Greenock, which is Clydeside, as you probably well know, that he was a free man. He didn't know.
Not a Freemason. Not a Freemason.
No, a free man. That's Freemasonry and all that. This is all side to confuse people. Oh, this, that, and the other. This man, that man, this whatever. It's a bit like free man, really, and not you're a free man on the land, and all these things are to confuse and to misconception, take you off the scent.
But you go back to the Freemasons, they've got some history, haven't they? Obviously,
they have got some history, but a lot of people don't know about the Knights Hospitallers, do they?
Oh my goodness!
People don't know about the Knights Hospitallers and how how the Templars were stabbed in the back by a certain French king and a pope, and the Hospitallers took all of what the Knights Templars were about, and everybody thinks that the Freemasons in London and everything like that. It's all this Knights Templar stuff. But after the Knights Templars came the Knights Hospitallers.
Yeah. Norman, you're very lucky you are where you're at, because I'm looking at the map and I didn't realize, and I'm looking at all the different names of different towns and cities. And on an island at the very top of Scotland, there's a town called Twat. I'm like, are you serious?
We've also got a sense of humor,
Yeah. I mean, you gotta have a sense of humor for not getting knickers on your kilt. Goodness.
Anyway, guys and girls, I've been told we've got to wrap up because we've gone a few minutes over. It's 2 hours, and we like to keep it to the 2 hours. Norman, thanks for coming in. It's good to hear you and your thoughts and everything. I hope you enjoyed the evening. And
interesting.
I'll come in any time on any actions in the future. We talk about all sorts of things, and
but it's like
it doesn't matter whether we're right, wrong, or
really. I'm trying to do things in Morocco on a like a sustainable level. So
all right, okay.
When I go back, I'm going back to Morocco in about a week.
Good stuff, Norman.
Norman,
stay with us. We'll discuss this in after talk. We're going to end this one for now.
All right. Yeah, but don't sign off, Norman. We're just gonna go from not live to from live to not live. So hang on a minute, guys and girls. Thanks very much for the chat tonight. It's been very interesting, and hopefully everybody had an input, and we'll do it again next week on something else. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Cheers. Take care.